Good afternoon. On behalf of Amity Institute of International Studies, I, Kathy Vijaj, welcome you all to the 7th technical session of VIJIGISHU 2020 on the theme Reimagining South Asia. I extend a very warm welcome to the distinguished chair of the session, Dr. Raymond Lam. Dr. Lam is a lecturer at the History Department of Hong Kong Baptist University. He holds a PhD in Political Science from the University of Queensland, Australia. His primary research interests lies in the fields of international relations, African studies, Africa-China relations, international responses to genocide and mass atrocities, as well as Hong Kong politics and society. I further extend my welcome to fellow presenters, Ms. Sampriti Biswas, Research Scholar at Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, Dr. Swasti Rao, Assistant Professor at Aligarh Muslim University, India, Mr. Sandeep Singh, who is pursuing his post-graduation at Amity Institute of International Studies, Ms. Nilanjana Shah, Research Scholar at Amity University, Colonel Satyajit Ghoshal, Research Scholar at Amity University, and Mr. S. Haridas, who is also pursuing his post-graduation from Amity Institute of International Studies. I also welcome fellow scholars who have joined us through Zoom or are watching us live on Facebook. We are glad to witness your presence today. Now, without any further ado, I would kindly request the chair of the session, to take the session forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished scholars, professors, experts. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity express my thanks for giving me the conference organizers for giving me this opportunity to chair this section. So it's really my honor and privilege to be here getting involved in this very timely and important webinar. So for this section, we are going to have 4 panelists discussing and elaborating the topics. And what I would like to do for this section right now is I would like to share my perspectives very briefly, I think in 10 minutes, on the BRICS countries and their evolving position on the responsibility to protect, the R2P principle. This R2P principle, or the responsibility to protect, actually this year marks the 15th anniversary of the R2P principle since its adoption by the UN member states at the 2005 UN World Summit, which is also the year marking the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the UN. And the R2P principle was being adopted unanimously by all the UN member states, in which states entails responsibility. And the responsibility involves, or I would say the state has a primary responsibility to protect its people from 4 specific set of crimes under international law: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. And what I would like to talk about in this section is about understanding how BRICS countries, their position, or their evolving approach towards the responsibility to protect principle. And first of all, the reason why I would like to explore or elaborate the BRICS countries' position on the R2P principle is, while the R2P principle was first born in 2001, following the release and the publication of the ICISS, okay, International Convention on State Sovereignty and Intervention. This is the year in which this principle, being known as R2P, was born. Okay, but this is also the same year in which we have witnessed the birth of, or the emergence of Brics. Okay, which I'm referring to these five major emerging powers: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And at the 2005 UN World Summit, as we have witnessed, is the Brics country. They had unanimously support the R2P principle, expressing its complete agreement on Pillar 1, which refers to the state's primary responsibility to protect its population, and also Pillar 2, which refers to the international community's responsibility to assist states in protecting their population. Especially the four specific crimes that I have just mentioned under international law. But perhaps what we have to, what I would like to bring you guys attention here perhaps is the voting patterns of the Brics countries in the Security Council in 2011. While all members of the Brics held seats within the council. So the Libyan crisis was proved to be a very controversial, case being addressed by the UN Security Council. While on the one hand, the Security Council, virtually all of the Security Council members, they were mostly concerned with the protection of civilians. But the Brics country, the major source of disagreement among the Brics country is their strong disagreement against the deployment of military force or the use of military force in the settlement of the Libyan conflict. For example, China, Russia, Brazil, and India, they have all chosen to abstain from voting on the UN Resolution 1973 rather than voting against it. It can be understood as the states or the Brics countries that tacit agreement of this protection responsibilities being held by states. But they were not convinced with, in particular, the Pillar 3 responsibility, which refers to the use of military force as the last resort. When countries have failed their responsibilities for protecting their people, their population from genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. And in many ways, the reason why the Brics countries were hesitant in embracing or endorsing full support of, say, the Pillar 3 responsibility of the R2P concept is they were largely concerned with the potential abuse of the R2P principle, which may constitute regime change. This is exactly what we have witnessed in the case of Libya. And in this sense, actually, what I would like to do is to quote, the India's permanent representative to the UN, and the Rupam Sen, and this is basically what they said, and I quote: R2P could work only if the institutional architecture of the United Nations is reformed significantly. Okay, hey, basically what he was arguing here is that, okay, not only the consent, okay, of the relevant countries or regional organizations, but also the consent of a reform and expand the Security Council. And only through this, okay, that the application of the R2 principle, okay, would be deemed as acceptable. And in particular, he strongly laid emphasis on the veto restraint. Okay, and also stressed that the permanent members of the Security Council should avoid using the veto in situations where the General Assembly had already determined the application of R2P. So in terms of understanding India's position on the R2 principle, okay, the thing that the New Delhi is mostly concerned with here is whether R2P, okay, is being understood or is being used, okay, as something like what Ambassador Durham Palmsand suggested, the idea of military humanism. So in this sense, okay, what India is trying to do is to contain the principles and the practice of R2P in order to make it conform to the pluralist view of world order. Okay, so in a nutshell, while R2P, the application of R2P, okay, is no longer a fundamental question. I mean, what I'm referring to here is the question, okay, is not about whether R2P should be adopted or not, but this is about in what ways should R2P be implemented, okay, in an appropriate manner. And in terms of understanding the Brics countries, okay, their positions on R2P, okay, perhaps one thing that we can all agree here is developing countries or the Brics countries, okay, they don't have any questions, okay, regarding the implementation of Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 responsibilities. So basically, it means countries, okay, they convince, okay, with this protection responsibility, okay, being embraced by countries, okay. But on the other hand, okay, countries, the Brics countries, the developing countries, they were still kind of hesitant, okay, in terms of embracing fully the Pillar 3 responsibility. Okay, that is the use of military force as a last resort for addressing, okay, for addressing, okay, or for dealing with cases of states' unwillingness or states' incapacity of exercising its protection responsibility. So in the long run, okay, for R2P to be applicable or to be given its acceptance, okay, what is necessary for the international community to do, okay, is to convince, okay, is to convince the Brics country as well as countries coming from the developing world that R2P is not something equivalent to humanitarian intervention, okay, or say military humanitarian intervention. The use of military force, okay, in terms of responding to genocide and mass atrocities would only always be a matter of last resort. And this, okay, in my opinion, okay, would make the applicability of R2P, make the principle itself, okay, or implementation of the R2P principle itself a lot easier. So this is just my very brief observation, which I would like to share, okay, at this point. Okay, given the time constraints, so given that, okay, we have got some 4 panelists during the presentation, so probably, again, I would just simply stop here, and I would like to, first of all, invite Ms. Sampriti Biswa doing her presentation. The topic, okay, that she is giving for today's section is entitled Russia, Pakistan, Rapprochement and its implications for India. So with no further ado, delay, may I invite Ms. Sampriti Biswa giving her presentation, please.
Ms. Samriti, please unmute yourself. Actually, you are not audible right now.
Oh, okay. Should we just make a swap of presentation order? If Ms. Biswa is not available at the moment.
Samriti, any issue on your part? Your voice is not audible actually.
Yeah, it seems
Okay.
she
So
is
please,
not responding.
Chair,
So
please call the
then
next
if
presenter. While Samriti will
okay,
be busy.
sure. So may I invite Dr. Swasi Rao, assistant professor from Aga Muslim University, and he is giving a paper, a presentation entitled Post-Colonial IR Theory, Emerging Post-Pandemic Worldview from South Asia.
Yeah.
Dr. Rao,
So much.
please.
Is my screen and visible to everyone, and is my voice audible to everyone? All right,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So very good
All good,
afternoon
all
to
good.
everyone here, and I must extend my thanks to the team, at Amity and NICE who have been working tirelessly to bring this together. Thank you so much, Dr. Chair, and for giving us your precious time. And with this, let me start. And I think we're giving about 10 minutes for the presentation. Is that correct? All right. So today, what I want to be presenting on is that I want to talk about post-colonial IR theory and what are the post-pandemic worldviews which are emerging from South Asia. And just before I begin, I need to sort of come clean on this. Is that with what is happening in the world, it is a very exciting time, and especially for us analysts. And there's so much happening, and the world order is changing, etc. So I've been very keenly observing some of the presentations here right here, and personally I feel that there is a lot of talk on what is happening and strategizing, etc. So I thought that for the time I would rather present on something which is more theoretical as to what really what future holds for us in terms of theory building from South Asia. And for that I thought that I would focus my presentation on that. The time is such that I would rather come to the main body of my paper, and I would look forward to more questions later on if people are interested in asking questions. So with that, let me now begin. So well. So, this entire thing has started from Barry Buzan and Amitav Acharya because, around 2007, 2010, they wrote a very famous book that we these days, refer to a lot as to why is there no non-Western international theory. And basically, it was a kind of a very clear theoretical attack on what really are the post-colonial theorists doing, because there's so much post-colonialism and still we are not able to have a post-colonial theory. And Amitav Acharya at 2014 at the International Studies Association, he introduced the idea of this global IR. And what was this global IR? In very short, it was that we need to go beyond the Western ethnocentric theorization, okay, and come up with a body of theory and a body of work which can be rightly called as a global IR. Now, global IR does not necessarily mean that it has to be non-Western. Global IR particularly means something that can rightfully, justifiably, reflect the global reality. Okay. So like that, because for now we know that the IR that we teach today and we study today does not reflect the voices and the experiences from the vast majority of the world. So so it's not just a counter that you have to go anti-Western, but it has to be post it, so that is the idea of global IR. So clearly then, the kind of the post-colonial environment that we are now getting is definitely, which is that we cannot go on ignoring the non-West, because there has been a lack of interest in knowledge, but we cannot go on ignoring that, okay? Because the kind of Western theories we have today, they do not explain the non-West particularly. So what are the critical alternatives then we have? The critical alternatives we have is that we need to open up IR, of course, but it does not mean that we delegitimize the Western dominance. So are we only going to look at what post-liberal hegemony? Because obviously there is so much talk about the breakdown of the liberal order. So are we only going to look at it in material terms? So if not the liberal hegemony, then what, right? And this is a question that we are all trying to grapple with, along with IMF and etc. Or does it also need to be ideational, which means that can we add something to the Western norm giving, which is like the constructivist, the dominant constructivist approach? And obviously epistemological, because we need to make a theory out of it. So the main point that I want to focus here is that yes, post-colonial ideas are important because we now know that the subaltern can speak, true, but can the subaltern act? Can that resistance that we have been, kind of capitalizing upon, can that be taken as a form of agency, right? And when we take it as a form of agency, can it be important enough to actually add to the global IR? So that is a position that, Amrita Acharya has also taken in his recent work, and something that I would like to extend on, okay? What we then need to do is that we do not need to, the key takeaways from this post-colonial debate that we have now is that we do not need to reject merely, but we need to broaden, right, the existing IR theories. So not anti, but post-Western. And we need to stress on multiple foundations of IR as a discipline and a theory. So what we are coming to now is that we're suggesting a kind of a hybridity. Not merely something which is Western and non-Western, because we know that we cannot look at the world now in terms of binaries. So we have to be something which is more hybrid, something of a hybrid nature. And so what we then get is a kind of a pluralistic universalism, right? And we have to give legitimacy to the agency of the other, which is, the post-colonial and the non-Western societies. Now, with this understanding, let me now hit the post-colonial debate 101. And the two underlining features are, okay, of course, there is a lot of debate in post-colonialism, and there is a paucity of time, and, we can't really get into the nitty-gritties. But the key issues are two, which is that post-international relations as constituting discourses of power. Okay, key issues in international relations are discourses of power, that is one. And the other main thing is that post-colonial scholars see international system not as anarchy, but as hierarchy. So with this, we are post-colonial, scholars examine how societies and governments and people in formerly colonized regions of the world experience a different type of international relations, right? So obviously, there the perceptions are extremely important. How are we perceiving the legacies of colonization and imperialism? So like, for example, I thought it is very interesting because to kind of highlight this understanding of the race, because how the concept of race has been constructed and how this black brown man is made to believe in his inferiority at a as a psychological aspect of colonization. And what is more important than that, of course, that is something we all understand, and there's a lot of debate and discussion on this. But what I want to bring to focus is if you get into the debate of race, it will highlight how they have radicalized the othering frames of not just history, but contemporary debates of national security, nuclear politics, nationalism, culture, immigration, international aid, struggle for indigenous rights. So this is something which then is not merely a category out there or like a historical thing, but it is something which is very, very real. It is breathing, right, in the contemporary discourse of international politics. So I wanted to bring this out. Some more lacuna I want to point out before I hit on South Asia particularly, that if you look at the global South, okay, now the global South also is not a homogeneous region. Global South suffers from double marginalization, which is because usually there is a core-periphery divide in Western theory and post-colonial theory, that Western theory is core and whatever is happening in the rest of the world is periphery. But even if you look at the periphery, there is again another periphery. So there is so much focus on the Brics, but then the other countries and other societies are marginalized. So one unifying goal might be to challenge the domination of the global North, So if you're doing that, good enough. But then if you are not taking, in account the power asymmetries between the global South states themselves, the story is still, far from complete, right? So, because we need to understand that inequalities are not exclusive to North-South relations, but they also permeate relations between the states of the South, right? So that is one point that I think this is, really important. And often when we are talking about the global South, we are only referring to the BRIC countries, but what about the others, right? So we need to kind of, take into account this lacuna. So with all of this, now let me come to South Asia, and I can see I have very little time left, but I would request the chair to give me 1 more minute so then I can just wrap up. The one thing that we need to know is that South Asia is a victim of border politics. Okay, so it is a victim of cartographic narrative. And we need to understand in today's times, and the more we enter, a times of global commons and, factors like the pandemics, we need to understand that borders are also personal. They are not merely, political lines which are drawn here and there. They cannot be understood separate from the bodies they affect. And the geopolitics of knowledge cannot be separated from the lived experience of others. So these are the two things which are very, very important. And with this, if we look at South Asia, I already said that, South Asia, in my opinion, is a victim of cartographic politics. We tend to assume that there is a concrete reality assumption about South Asia, that South Asia is something concrete. So South Asia is SAARC countries, right? A region which is usually referred in international politics. It is imagined primarily in geographical and geostrategic terms, and right now it is so volatile because it is home to so many conflicts, right? So, and it is also assumed that South Asia is a product of modernity, which is not the case, in a way, because it is an unfinished project of modernity. Look at the way nations have been drawn in South Asia. They're completely, the colonial hangover. So what I'm saying is that we probably cannot change the borders, right, on the map, but we can definitely then try to look at it in a different way to create a different kind of a knowledge to refer better to the problems we have at hand. And I will just, quickly wrap up that we land in this disjunct because there is a conflictual volatility. There are a lot of conflicts, but this is not in sync with the intellectual and cultural terrains because we have been limited by the nationalized domains of knowledge production. And our heuristic requirement at the time is to locate modernity within the larger idea of South Asia, which goes beyond the conflictual nature, and to reimagine that region. And how do we do that? We do it by three ways. We need to decontextualize. So with this overriding context of the nation state and the way the Britishers have left the legacy, we need to decontextualize, deterritorialize, okay, the way we look at the territory, and detextualize as to the text that we have been referring to. So with all of this, we need to relearn the authentic value. Now, it obviously seems like a utopia, but what I mean to say is that the current tools that are available to us when it comes to theorizing about South Asia are simply not enough, because look at the mess that we have landed ourselves in, right? So that is what I'm saying, that we need certain analytical tools. One of the tools that I suggest is a thick culture understanding of Clifford Creeds, and that will help break the myth of the nation state, if not at all, because obviously that we cannot go away from the nation state for now. But since I am talking about a very theoretical perspective, we definitely need to kind of overstep it. Right, so I think I've already overshot my time, so I will stop right away. And thank you so much for the time, and I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rao, for your very insightful analysis of what non-Western post-colonial IR theory is supposed to be. So next, may I invite Ms. Sapriti Biswa.
Am I audible now? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So the presentation topic that Ms. Biswa is giving for this section is entitled Russia-Pakistan Rapprochement and its implications for India. So Ms. Biswa is all yours.
Okay, so firstly, thank you so much for that introduction, and I also apologize for the technological glitch that happened.
I'm going to speak on Russia-Pakistan rapprochement and its implications for India. Now, to begin with, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the trajectory of Russia-Pakistan bilateral relations in the Yeltsin era. And then I'm going to shift to the present scenario. The focus of my study is the post-2014 period. But just for the uninitiated, I'm going to give a brief overview of the relation, the historic side, the historic trajectory of the bilateral relations. So right after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia was pretty occupied with a pro-West orientation in its foreign policy. And the foreign minister of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, and the president, Boris Yeltsin, they had sort of they sort of undertook a pro-West foreign policy, and that is why Russia had failed to come up with an independent foreign policy course in its relations with the Asian countries. And in that context, Pakistan failed to feature as one of the prominent nations in Russia's foreign policy. But all of this changed right after the foreign minister was replaced, when Andrei Kozyrev was replaced by Yevgeny Primakov. The shift in Russia's foreign policy changed from the west to the eastern countries, and this is when countries like India, Pakistan, China, they started featuring prominently in Russia's foreign policy. Now, right after the disintegration, there were a couple of high-level exchanges between these two nations, and like leaders of both these nations, they kind of visited each other, and they discussed issues ranging from infrastructural development to issues of energy cooperation and the likes. But even though this warming of ties was evident in the mid 1990s and after and subsequently, but then in the late 1990s we could see that there was a change. Ruptures were soon developing between Russia and Pakistan, and these ruptures were mainly due to three factors. Firstly was the recommencement of Russia's ties with India. Right after President Putin assumed office, a strategic agreement was signed between Russia and India, which of course did not go down well with Pakistan. And secondly, Pakistan's support to the Taliban forces in Afghanistan was also an important factor. And thirdly, Putin's energetic approach in the Central Asian region to yield influence in the Central Asian region was also did not go down well with Islamabad. So this was the time when scholars began to doubt the possibility of any genuine cooperation between Russia and Pakistan. But soon the 9/11 incident happened, which sort of paved the way for a new phase in their bilateral relations. Now, from 2000 to up to 2014, if we analyze Russia's foreign policy concepts and doctrines, we could see that Pakistan did not feature prominently in Putin's foreign policy concept, except for once in 2008. Russia was hardly mentioned, and not only in the foreign policy concepts, even in the president's address and president's documents addressing Asian countries, Pakistan did not find a mention. And each time it did, it was only pertaining to the Afghan issue. In 2007 and thereafter, there was a distinct change in Russia's foreign policy orientation. We could see that Russia's foreign policy was becoming more assertive, and that was, of course, manifested in the crisis in Georgia, then subsequently in Crimea in 2014. But at the same time, Russia's warming of ties with Pakistan was coming at the backdrop of the Crimean crisis. Right after the Crimean crisis, the West had put sanctions on Russia. So Russia had to diversify its trade ties. And it was in this context that Russia's recalibration of ties with Pakistan was evident. We could see that Russia had signed the historic trade agreement with Pakistan, and had also uplifted the arms embargo. And this was historic because previously Russia did not supply weapons to Pakistan. But all this was coming at the backdrop of an assertive foreign policy on the part of Russia. It was coming right after sanctions were put on Russia. Russia wanted to diversify its trade ties, and so Pakistan was also looking at options, and that is why the recalibration was pretty evident. Now, most literature in Russia-Pakistan ties have listed out 4 to 5 important factors. They say that Russia and Pakistan, this rapprochement is basically happening because China is playing an important role in bringing both the strategic partners together, and this has been manifested by Russia's role in the CPEC, and then of course Pakistan's admission in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Secondly, besides the role of China, the role of USA have also featured prominently. Historically, if we see, USA's relations with Pakistan have always impinged Pakistan's relations with Russia. So right after President Trump had said that USA would no longer provide security assistance to Pakistan, Pakistan was trying to explore options, and Russia did come in handy at this point of time. Thirdly, a lot of scholars have attempted to show that how India's diversification of weapon procurement is not going down well with Russia, and that is why Russia is trying to sell weapons to Pakistan. So these are the factors, and added to this, one important factor is of course the Afghan issue. The insecurity in Afghanistan is also leading Russia to recalibrate its ties with Pakistan. Now, I argue that out of all these factors, the most important factor in the present time has been the Afghan issue, which is leading Russia to recalibrate its ties with Pakistan. And to substantiate my argument, I would like to say that if we analyze Russia's foreign policy documents and contracts, as I've already reiterated, Pakistan does not feature in any of those except for once in 2008. In other foreign policy concepts of 2013, 2016, Putin's own article on Russia and the relation of Russia with the changing world, Pakistan has not been mentioned. And even when Pakistan has been mentioned, it has mostly been mentioned in relation to the instability in Afghanistan. Secondly, if we also analyze the military agreement, and we also, if you see the military exercises, we know that mostly all of these are anti-terrorism exercises, and they are mostly performed within the ambit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in collaboration with other member states. And thirdly, a Russian president is yet to visit Pakistan. The kind of military, the weapon trade and economic trade is at an incipient level. So we cannot argue that, we cannot say that Pakistan's or Russia's warming stance towards Pakistan will push India closer to the US. Now, if I give a comparative analysis of Russia's ties with Pakistan and India, we can see that Russia's strategic relation with India has been extremely invested, extremely invested and steeped in historical nostalgia. The strategic agreement, partnership agreement was signed in 2000 and subsequently was upgraded into the special and privileged partnership agreement. But with Pakistan, Russia does not have any kind of strategic agreement partnership. Secondly, at the economic realm, we can see that at the end of 2019, trade between Russia and India had increased. A number of initiatives were taken by the heads of states, and there was the Prime Minister Narendra Modi had also addressed a joint summit in which he called for the creation of Russia Plus to kind of help the Russian investors in India. But with Pakistan, economic trade relations, the figures have been unimpressive. They are far below potential. And as far as as far as we analyze the public perception, the Russian public's perception of India and Pakistan, the Levada Center in a survey had stated that the Russians, they kind of, in the survey, they had identified India as one of their top allies, while Pakistan does not feature in that list. So if we analyze this entire comparative analysis basically shows that Russia will not, not betray India in that sense. it is warming up its ties with Pakistan, but this warming up, this rapprochement needs to be analyzed within the wider context of the change that is taking place in Russia's foreign policy. Russia's foreign policy is becoming more assertive. It wants to play an active role in South Asia. It also wants to diversify its trade relations, and this comes at the backdrop of the sanctions that has been put by the West on Russia. Now, on the question of whether the COVID, whether this global pandemic will at all deepen and widen this bilateral relation, we know that in the past there have been natural calamities in Pakistan, and Russia has kind of provided assistance, humanitarian aid and assistance. And even in this COVID situation, telephonic conversations have taken place between the foreign ministers of both the countries. Russia has the Pakistani foreign minister has said that they want Russia's help to kind of deal with the fragile healthcare system in Pakistan, and also they have discussed, like Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, along with his Pakistani counterpart in a telephonic conversation. They also discussed about the socio-economic ramification of this global pandemic. And apart from that, we know that how even the foreign minister have also stated that that Pakistan is very sure that if Pakistan asks for help from Russia, Russia will comply with it, like it has done in the past when floods had ravaged Pakistan in 2005 and 2010. And also added to this, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, had come up with the global initiative of debt relief in the backdrop of the global pandemic, where Pakistan stated that it wants a debt relief because COVID has played havoc with the economy of developing countries. And Russia's Prime Minister positively responded to that, saying that Russia will do its bit to help Pakistan out. But we also need to realize that cooperation coming at the backdrop of this global pandemic is natural, and but at the same time, this cooperation can also coexist with confrontation that Russia has with Pakistan on other issues. So it is not to say that this bilateral relationship should be viewed from the prism of a zero-sum game where there'll be only cooperation or confrontation. It can perfectly coexist. But as I've already stated that the Afghan issue is the primary issue that is bringing this rapprochement between Russia and Pakistan. So there is absolutely nothing to worry for India. It is absolutely restrictive for scholars to say that this warming stance between Russia and Pakistan will push India towards the US, because Russia and India, they share a very invested relationship, as I've already stated, and Russia has spoken on behalf of India's membership in an expanded United Nations Security Council. Russia has also supported India in the recent spat that took place between India and Pakistan on the virtual meet of the SCO, where the NSA chief walked out after Pakistan had displayed a distorted map that the Russian authorities were quick to criticize. So, having said that, Russia-India ties cannot be compared to Russia-Pakistan ties, because Russia-Pakistan ties are at an incipient stage. They have a lot to catch up, and Pakistan has only featured in Russia's foreign policy concepts as far as Afghanistan has been concerned, because even from the Moscow process, the Moscow process was this parallel initiatives that were taken up by Russia to address the situation in Afghanistan. And at Russia's behest, India was also included in this process, process of bringing peace and stability in Afghanistan. So all in all, even if Russia-Pakistan relations are improving, there is nothing to worry. And it is restrictive to say that this warming of stance will make New Delhi, suspicious of Russia, or will push New Delhi towards Washington. Thank you. With that, I would like to end my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Biswa, for giving us this very informative, but also very comprehensive analysis of this dynamics, the changing dynamics of the Russian Pakistan relations and its implications for India. So next, may I invite Mr. Samdeep Singh. He is going to give a paper presentation on the Chinese aggression, okay, and the Indo-Pacific region. Yeah,
Sir, am I audible and visible to all?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Just allow
Yeah, the floor is yours. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
I hope my presentation is visible to all.
Yes, Sandeep, it's visible and you are perfectly audible. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Good afternoon to everyone, Mr. Chairperson, Professor, and my dear friends. But before, as I am going to talk about my topic is China aggression and Indo-Pacific region. So before that, I would like to give a short brief and I would also like to mention what are the areas I'm going to cover. At first, I will establish the interpretation of Indo-Pacific in a very short. And thereafter, I will talk about the Chinese aggression in COVID pandemic, why China is doing this, countering China, and role of Asia. And at the last, I will talk about the roadmap ahead. So, as a geographical concept, Indo-Pacific has been existed before, for decades also. But the German geopolitician Karl Hosseffer was the first to use the term Indo-Pacific in around 1920s in his work called Indo-Pacificization, Rome, if I pronounce correctly, I'm sorry. And after that, we have seen that many of the analysts starting observing this area in geo-economic term. But after the 2000 onwards, they started to begin to observe it as with the security linkages. And I must say that the Indo-Pacific region is a construct of contested interpretation. Some say it as a Asia-Pacific, and some say it as Indo-Pacific. And the boundaries is a kind of debate in which we can have for long. But for now, I will talk about the India, which is a key player in this region. And according to the Indian, and India has a majority country, and during this Shangri-La dialogue, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has presented India's vision of Indo-Pacific, which are rooted from our historical association with the region. When I say about the historical association, I can make out that the area from the area touching the African country till Japan via Asian countries. So if I say about the clarity of our approach is very clear that it should be Asian central, and whatever we're doing is not considered to be against any country. We want a free Indo-Pacific region. And now talking about China, historically, if I talk about before 1433, when Ming Yanli, if I pronounce that right, was the emperor, and he sent Yang He's expedition into Indian Ocean. Before that, after that, we will see that the Chinese naval activities were limited to the South China Sea, Bohai Sea, Yellow Sea, and in this particular area. And by no means I would suggest that they did not have a very important role in this region, because one should also remember that China has a Silk Route, and China was in contact with the Asian, the countries, those who are living in the region of Indo-Pacific. And recently, I will talk about the China, when the pandemic spread across the developing nation. It has accelerated the combination of forces which were already transforming the world. It was clear that China is becoming a superpower. And one of these trends has been the contrary to the expectation that China rise and transformation has not been as peaceful as it was considered before due to the economic boom. The world has observed that it has given an opportunity for China to deepen its influence. Either we talk about debt trap of World Belt and Road Initiative, or using political and military power, mainly in the Indo-Pacific region. And world are witnessing the increased aggressive claim of China in the form of military drills. deployed asset and energy exploitation. Likewise, I talk about the China is increasing its presence in the backyard of the US backyard. Recently, the Ecuadorian official have claimed that around 325 vessels have sailed close to the exclusive economic zone of their territories on the Galapagos Islands. And besides this, we know that there are tension between Vietnam and China for Parsley Island, this, and in Indonesia and China for Natuna Sea. Then countries like China, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, all have dispute for this Parsley Island. In the past few months alone, the world has seen it clash with India in one of the worst border player in the decades. And we are seeing that escalated standoff between Vietnam and Malaysia in the South China Sea. And even they are pressurizing Taiwan with nighttime drills in the Taiwan Strait. And even threatening Australia with the boycott of wine, beef, barley, and the Chinese student there. After talking about all this, the one question may arise that why China is doing this. And for this, I will surely be categorized in the 3 points. One, I believe that to maintain its economic and maritime dominance and to secure its energy requirement and to boosting its trading ties with the countries. As we know, the Indo-Pacific region is the world's most crucial sea routes, like through if we talk about the Strait of Malacca, world most populous nation, fueling high energy demand on its routes. And that is why China is growing its strides in the South Asian water along the string of ports, which are known as string of pearls. And second, I would consider, this is the China's naval network. One can easily identify that string of pearls in that, and the sea routes in this. Okay. Now the second reason would be China has a geographical advantage. When I say geographical advantage, one is very clear that China is a big country. It has a long boundary along the sea. But here specifically, I would like to mention that China has control over the water supply in the in 18 countries. For example, if I talk about the Mekong River only, it starts from the China, goes to the Burma, which is Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. On this river only, they have built around 11 dams, and it gives control over the lifeline of 60 million people in this region. If I talk about India, on the Brahmaputra River, they have the Jammu Delta, and along with this, they are building the 3 more dams. To my knowledge, what I can see is that they are controlling the power of water, which is a direct indication of a hydro war. They can use it as a weapon at any point of time. My third point would be China has internal instability, which is most important for like if we talk about Uyghurs community, the Xinjiang human rights concerns, Hong Kong issue, recent days, right? And the bad effect of COVID-19 on its economy, that I will cover later. But so like every country, what they are doing is that they are trying to distract the attention of its people and the world to the external issue than that of the internal issue. I think these 3 points were the reason. And if you study the pattern, the China has a behavioral pattern. What they do, firstly, they start building up power over the other state while assuring that they will do not harm them, or they will not going to use them against them. But once they get the dominance power over there, they start abusing them by political, economical, and military level. And one can refer to a report which is Center for New America Security in 2018 for a brief study about this. And this pattern is very, very important because recently China has been amassing the big data for information security further. and it gradually pushing the control of other states' digital infrastructure, basically 5G, hardware and software, undersea cables, and which indicate that what China can't hack earlier is preparing to be able to sabotage, to control over this. In short, I would say this is a kind of informationized skirmish. To sum up to this level, I would say that the 5 most important facts of the China total competition campaign in the South China Sea and South Asia is first is economic power, information dominance, maritime power, psychological operation, and lawfare. If China is able to dominate this region, it will exploit not only the trade but also the geopolitics and natural resources of this area for own self-interest, and which will lead him to become a new superpower in the world against America. Now the question arises, the things are going on, what will we do for countering China? And the first is Quad, which we have been talking about since last 2 days we have been talking about. So I take here liberty to not mention the brief detail about this, but I will cover that why these countries are interested in this Quad. I have mentioned out around 7, sorry for the number mistake. But the first is China great power affecting their natural security. We are seeing that growing influence in China, of China in their political and academia, etc. The third is threat of economical retaliation, because we know the world is depending upon manufacturing hub of China. Anything which we can think about is manufactured in China today. An increased tension in South China Sea and influence in Indian Ocean. Like I have already mentioned, Xinjiang human rights concerns, threatening Taiwan, Hong Kong policies, and the world has seen that China is accountable for the COVID-19 and taking over the infrastructure by Huawei, the 5G and intellectual property theft. These are the major concerns which create a group among the nations, basically India, Australia, USA, and Japan. And I can go up to the extent saying that the Asian country has started observing this. They also feel the same kind of interest in which. So action taken by recently, by the dialogue, we have the Malabar exercise. We know that the India, Japan, USA will invite Australia in the exercise, which is going to end in 2020, December. And to counter the BRI of China, they have formed the Blue Dot Network. And so that they can invest some money in the development in this area, so that which is direct counter of the BRI. And recently we know that New Zealand, South Korea, Vietnam have joined for the first time. And India had talked with France and Australia for maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region. Now I'll take the leverage to talk mainly about India, because India is a major country, and if we talk about in the Indo-Pacific, this is mainly, we see that India emerged in a role, has to play a vital role in this. Talking about this boundary with China, then we see that the CPEC, which passes through the Indian territory, has the direct political and military effect on India. India will be affected by the BRI, whether it succeed or not, this is the different issue, but its neighboring country will definitely gonna be dependent on the China. This is which we known as debt trap indirectly. And India has 2 policies to concern this, which one is the Act East policy and other is SAGAR, the security and growth for all in this region. And in this, India has 2 approaches. One approach is regarding the maritime awareness, which aim to provide information on all the development and the movement across the Indian Ocean. And second, they talk about the expansion of its presence, which is very clear from its deployment of ship and aircraft in the 7 key locations, which strengthened India's ability in this region. Recently, the COVID-19, no doubt, India gained a weightage for a strategic position, and India is doing this, is a key responsible player in this, sending medicine to the sub-countries and all, which we have talked about. So again, now I will take you to another slide, which is regarding, okay. Now we have seen that China, the world is affected by the COVID-19, but we also seen that China's aggression and COVID-19 has also affected China itself. So the first point would be like this supply chain in China has disrupted, because we have seen this recently that number of companies are shifting operation from China, and India and Asian country as most favored nation. And recently in April, India has changed its FDI policy, in which they have the countries having the land border have to seek permission from the government to invest in India, which is directly to prevent opportunistic investment in country, specifically, as I mentioned, in China. And at the same time, the world is exploring new efforts so that they can shift their manufacturing capabilities from China. And in spite of this, we have recently seen that the world has supported Taiwan for successfully handling the COVID-19 situation, and supported for observer status in a WHO assembly. And we have seen it was China only, due to which the quadrilateral security dialogue is grown in the last 1 year itself. Earlier, Quad was seen as a paper institution, not much influence in this area, but after the COVID and during this aggression, we have seen a rapid increase involvement of these nations. Now I will talk about the Asia, which is very important and very, very crucial in this. We see that one side we have China, another side is US, which is a direct. So how Asian country have see this and what's their approach? Like on the first session, Mr. Chairperson Pratap Singh has clearly mentioned that they are divided in themselves. The 10 countries, some are joining the bandwagoning, means they are go with the flow. Some are joining clearly the USA part, some are joining the China because they are dependent on it and they are already stuck with the debt trap. And some are trying to be neutral in this area. And we would talk about India in this perspective. As I have mentioned in my PPT that the RCEP, at one point we may justify that India has not taken part because India did not have the capability to face the world competition in manufacturing sector at that time. But had India been there, it would have provided a stability, a balance in that area, and would have influenced that area, which would be beneficial for long-term Act East policies. And I would say that this COVID-19 has helped the Asian country to look inward, to be independent, to make their policies, to take a stand on a particular issue. And this is very clear nowadays. And recently the Quad, the Blue Dot Network, is directly, as I mentioned, is countering the BRI independence of Asian countries over the China. Now I will talk about the roadmap. Just I will wind it up, though it had very long strategic policies and things to say, but I have written very short and precise. So the first is that at the first we have to deal with the pandemic. As we know, the world is suffering. The Quad country itself has to emerge from this, and at the same time they have to give the logistics and the medicines to the Asian country, and has to build the infrastructure in this area. Indonesia is suffering a lot. We know that. A second reason is that US, India, and Asian partnership will need to coordinate more closely. And this is only possible when the Asian country take a firm stand on this. The second is frequent exercise. Either it may be a military exercise, cultural exercise, meetings, or it may be political collaboration or something like that. And third is implementation of the Blue Dot Network very precisely. This has to be done right now, otherwise it will be too late to counter that. And fifth reason is, as I have mentioned about the West South Asia, the western area of India, which is from Pakistan, Iran, and this Iran area basically, due to the time constraint. But here I've just mentioned the one point is that China is making road in that area, and which is ahead of India. And India is failing to capitalize its full potential of international north-south trade corridor. India has to invest in that, and at the same time, Quad should must focus on this, because we also know that due to the US sanction, India is not able to get oil from the Iran and other countries on which the US has the sanction, which is hampering India's ties with these countries. Last 2 points, India must strengthen the relationship with Russia. We know that Russia is a good partner of India, but recently we are seeing that China, Pakistan, and other countries, hostile countries, they are trying to exert their influence over the Russia, because they know if Russia also get into this bandwagon, then definitely China has to surrender. At last, all the countries and the Asia has to pay attention to science, technology, research, development, and innovation, which is very, very crucial. Because once a country emerge out and successful development in this, then definitely it will have an influence over the world. With this, I conclude. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for Mr. Sandeep Singh, okay, for giving us a very insightful analysis.
Excuse me, Chair, I just need a minute, a permission from you. I just want to congratulate Mr. Sandeep. He's a PG student, an excellent presentation. I couldn't stop myself saying that. Congratulations, Sandeep. Please keep it up. You will be a good researcher. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Please continue.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I totally share Professor Raman's observation. And I found Mr. Singh's analysis, okay, of deeply impressive, and particularly his observation and his analysis on ways of counterbalancing China's the Belt and Road Initiative and its growing aggressiveness or assertiveness in this worldwide trend of desanitization. Right? And last but not least, may I invite Ms. Milanjana Saha, also a research scholar coming from the Amity International Institute. The paper presentation that she is giving is entitled "The Nuclear Arms Race in South Asia, Proliferation and Deterrence." Ms. Saha, please.
Yes. Good afternoon to all. Good afternoon, Chair. Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, HOI, and all the faculties, and to everyone out here. Well, I'll be presenting paper on nuclear arms race in South Asia and its proliferation and deterrence. First of all, apologies for not getting started with my video because of a certain technical glitch, but I'll try to connect it in between if it's possible. So, starting with the topic, the very first thing that comes with nuclear arms race in South Asia is something that is actually been continuing since ages. I mean, one can say that it has been probably continuing just after the end of the World War II. So we can trace back the roots of the roots of nuclear power or the roots of nuclear weapons building in South Asia, as back as the ending of the World War II and the starting of the Cold War at the very first time, because it was during that time that the world was seeming to probably have taken to post stages. So before that, I will share my slides and just a minute. So I believe my slides are visible to all.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So basically my study is a purely analytical one, and it is through purposive sampling. So with starting with the topic, I'll be speaking on, obviously, nuclear arms race. I'll be giving the brief history about it, the proliferation that has been taken throughout the history, as well as certain recent developments. Then, because of today's seminar, or sorry, today's webinar, I'll be talking about the changes that probably can occur in, multilateralism, the nations that we'll be looking forward for. I'll be talking about the instability of deterrence, as well as the proliferation that has actually been taken, which has actually led to arms race in South Asia. So continuing with the, starting with the introduction, nuclear arms race, yes. As I said, it can be said to have begun by the end of the World War II. There is 1945, when the Cold War initiated, and between the the then USSR and the US, the entire world was taken into hostage, and the South Asian region was subjected to institutionalized terror during that time. Now, witnessing the military capabilities of the great powers and their respective allies, the need to acquire an atom bomb was desired by many of the developing countries then, especially the newly independent states. Now, the 1953 Atom Program was a boon for all. Before continuing this point, let me introduce what is Atoms for Peace program is all about. Yes, Atoms for Peace, it is the peaceful utilization of atomic energy, basically for civilian purpose and not for military purpose. So the 1953 Atoms for Peace program, which was actually, bought by the then president of the US, Eisenhower, and that was in the 417th General Assembly plenary meeting. And he provided a platform for all the, for everybody, every developing states or every nations to come and join and act as an, international fuel, it acted as a bank for, sharing the nuclear capabilities of the nuclear power, helping nations with nuclear power and starting up their own nuclear power projects. So the 1953 Atoms for Peace program not only provided the platform for the non-nuclear weapon states to receive nuclear reactors and other nuclear technological aids for the nuclear program from the then nuclear powered states, but also proved advantageous in building nuclear weapons, which later on the state stayed in disguise. So there is also another point that I like to highlight. Why was this, basically the 1953 Atoms for Peace program that was actually created? There was another reason, that is the idea for creating an international fuel bank, as I was saying. The idea was by the US, and they actually wanted to keep an inspection through IAEA, that is International Atomic Energy Agency, which came into force in order to keep the Soviets' growing nuclear arsenal, keeping the Soviets' growing nuclear arsenal a check. And however, this did not mean that the Soviet then would obviously suffer. But back in 1953, in fact, after 4 years, the concept of having this international fuel bank withered away, and the role of IAEA became very limited, because the developing nations started, using their nuclear research reactors that were actually then supplied by the already nuclear weapon states, or even the allies with the nuclear weapon states. They started using the reactors for the military purposes, that is for building bombs, and that too they did that in disguise. So the next point that I would like to highlight is the 1962 Sino-India War. And this is the Sino-India War with the nuclear weaponization of China and the formation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty accelerated India's nuclear program, and building to such an extent that India tested its first nuclear weapon in 1974. So this further provoked Pakistan to obtain nuclear weapons, for which it took the Chinese assistance and marked its possession of nuclear bomb in 1998 through a series of nuclear explosions in response to India's explosions earlier in May the same year. So this has created effective nuclear deterrence, but proliferation of nuclear weapons continued, leading to an armaments race in South Asia. So I'll be focusing about, obviously, when we talk about South Asia, it comes to our mind Pakistan, and obviously we cannot ignore the China factor at the very same time. So that is also important while we're taking into account the nuclearization of India, the nuclearization of Pakistan, the proliferation activities, the assistance that Pakistan received from China, as well as the global community's concern. So this all the features I'll be highlighting in the coming slides. So the initiation, that is the beginning of the nuclearization of South Asia. Now, it is a point to be noted that India's nuclear weapons program got engineered much before our independence, and a proposal to establish a nuclear research institute was made by Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha in 1944, which was even a year before the US's first nuclear test at Alamogordo. So we can obviously, understand that basically the nuclear program actually initiated in India much before even the World War ended, actually. So Prime Minister of India, the then Prime Minister of India, that is Jawaharlal Nehru, had a much realistic outlook and suggested for developing the atomic energy, but for peaceful uses at first, obviously, and not only for war purpose. But this twin trail nuclear program led to the establishment of a laboratory named the Atomic Energy Establishment at Trombay, that is AEET, on 3rd August 1954, which later came to be known as the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, that is BARC, with which we are all familiar. Now, with the motive to dominate the world nuclear market, the US government started its Atom for Peace program on 8th December 1953. So when it started, it addressed in the UN signifying the program, and following these, the International Atomic Energy that I told you was set up, and it was set up under the UN to speculate the peaceful uses of nuclear technology, basically. I'll go to the next slide. Yes. Now, in August 1955, the first UN conference on the peaceful uses of atomic energy was held at Geneva, which was presided by Dr. Bhabha. And it was after his meeting that the selling of heavy waters for research reactor to India was agreed by the US, which cannot provide it actually. Simultaneously, Pakistan also took the advantage of this Atoms for Peace program, and in 1956, the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission was formed, that was headed by Munir Khan then, and students were obviously sent to overseas to get trained. At Rawalpindi, the Pakistan Institute of Nuclear Science and Scientific Technology, that is PINCHTEC, was established in 1963, and a civilian research reactor was given by the US, which is named as Pakistan Atomic Research Reactor, that is PAR-1, which however became dysfunctional in 1965. Before that, in 1958, being Minister of Mineral Resources, it was the time much before he became the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto supported the civilian program, but after being the foreign minister, when the Indo-Pak war got intense in October 1965, anticipating that India might build the bomb because of China's first nuclear explosion in 1964, he stressed on building nuclear weapons. So after that, the Indo-Pak War of 1971, it was during that time that Bhutto publicly announced in 1972 that Pakistan would engage in building nuclear weapons or nuclear device as such, and launched the Karachi nuclear power plant, that is Kanip 1, which was supplied by Canada. Further, in March 74, when Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission created a task force to work on nuclear weapons program, but India's first nuclear test on 18th May 1974 at program played a major role in provoking Pakistan to go nuclear and to make its program in a fast-scale rate. Now, the progress, however, in the plant of Pakistan, it was the Karachi nuclear plant, was slow, and until 1975, when Abdul Qadir Khan, a metallurgist who was working at a subsidiary of the Urenco Enrichment Corporation in Netherlands, brought scientific designs and business contacts back with him to Pakistan to help his country develop uranium enrichment plant, and used various tactics like buying separate companies and instead of full units, exporting, managing the export controls and all. The country started acquiring the necessary equipment which eased their nuclear program. Yeah. Now, coming to the part of nuclear proliferation, the beginning of the proliferation, if you see, if we refer to the term of proliferation, it has been referred as the spread of nuclear weapons, nuclear-related technology and fissile materials to the countries that do not already possess them. And this was actually happening during that time because it was nuclear weapons being spread to the countries which were not nuclear weapons at all. So that is what they have actually, referred to term as nuclear proliferation as. And sometimes, this word or this term is being, also referred as, the possessing of weapons or nuclear weapons by, armed or terrorist organizations as such. Now, with China becoming a nuclear power state and amidst the big power then, the formation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was called upon with the aim to stop or halt the further spreading of new planets-related technologies. However, when it became evident that the Non-Proliferation Treaty would consider only those nations as nuclear weapon states, which had tested nuclear weapon before 1st January 1967, which meant obviously the inclusion of China and exclusion of India, and that the treaty would not guarantee the disarming of the nuclear states. As such, India refused to become a signatory to the NPT. And this actually in turn triggered India's nuclear weapons in a much faster rate. After India's first nuclear test in 1974, Pakistan's nuclear weapons accelerated with A.Q. Khan's steps, obviously. He bought the materials, from Netherlands, from the Urenco, subsidiary. And on 11th March 1983, as late as that, at Kirana Hills, central Punjab, the cold test of nuclear device was carried out by the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission, and the country, of having acquired the capability to assemble a first-generation nuclear device. Stepping back after that, in 1989, there came into agreement the cylo agreement related with nuclear cooperation. Before that, it also must be noted, much before this 1989 agreement and this receiving of aid or assistance from China with related to its 27 kilowatt research reactor, which was provided for part 2 for its nuclear program. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto made several visits, after India's, especially after India's nuclear explosion, because what it wanted was nuclear cooperation, the training of their scientists, the training of the students, as it wanted to go nuclear, and the only partner to whom it can trust was China, because obviously the atrocities or the animosities and the kind of we had the tensions during that time prevailed with China. It was just after these Sino-India war even. So it was actually tactically played by Bhutto during that time to go to China and ask for help. And to China, despite being a party to NPT, it played its proliferation card and motive. So by playing its proliferation card during that time, in 1989, it provided the part 2, which actually strengthened the relationship between China and Pakistan, as the countries wanted or actually aimed at halting India's hegemony or the growing, the progressing India in South Asia as such. Now, despite all the three reactors which the Pakistan had, being under the safeguard of, IAEA during that time, the making of the atom bomb continued, and Pakistan began to pursue its plutonium production capabilities with China's assistance. And with this, we can understand the limited role of that IAEA because of its limited role and because of its not inspection as such, or not providing any kind of related necessary sanctions during that. The program continued, and Pakistan built the 40 megawatt Khrushchev research reactor at Jawaharabad in April 1998. It announced that the reactors are operational. So after it was, obviously, despite all the tensions during that time, despite, the CTBT that was actually forming in the, 1996, when China became a party and a signatory to the CTBT, September 1996, India was also asked, but India actually refused to do it because it did not actually mean it. It means of further testing of further stopping of testing the nuclear test, which India did not want to do. Also, there was another reason that it did not want to do because it suspected of Pakistan being nuclear power during that time, and it wanted Pakistan to come out of its ground and show its nuclear power capability. So immediately, after its reactors became, operational on 28 May 1998, 15 days, after India's series of nuclear explosion on 11th and 13th May, it was Pakistan detonated its 5 explosions on, 28th May, and the 6th one it did on 30th May, thereby marking and, publicly announcing its possession of nuclear weapons. So that was actually done in response to India, but it was also somehow, we can say that it was played well by India to actually take Pakistan's, ground reality to the world and show the hidden nuclear power that they had, the hidden nuclear weapons that they had rather. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif then of Pakistan, after the test, demonstrated that the test was actually needed in response to India, and that Pakistan's nuclear weapons were for self-defense to deter aggression only. With these tests, Pakistan abandoned its nuclear ambiguity, declaring that the country would maintain a credible minimum deterrence against India. However, Pakistan is yet to state a nuclear doctrine, because of which it is not clear as under what circumstances it might use its nuclear weapons. However, in 2002, President Pervez Musharraf announced that nuclear weapons were solely aimed at India, and it would be only used if the very existence of Pakistan as a state is at stake. So this actually alarmed the entire region during that time, especially India, obviously. Further, Pakistan attempted to expand its nuclear concord with China in response to the US-India deal during that time. And so what happened was, immediately after US-India deal, US-India nuclear deal, this actually, was taken by Pakistan as a kind of, challenge, or as an opportunity to again engage its program with China, and under previous cooperation with China, under the previous framework, with 2 pressurized water reactors, that is, Chanuk 1, and it entered into commercial operation in 2002, and with Chanuk 2, which it did in 2011. Now, much before 2011, there happened, there came with the congressional report, US congressional report, and that was in April 2010, which confirmed that China National Nuclear Corporation has agreed to provide 2 additional 650 megawatt power reactors to Pakistan for Chanuk 3 and Chanuk 4. So the rate of proliferation scale can be well understood, and the kind of nuclear resistance and its related technological assistance to Pakistan by China can be well understood with all these points. A plutonium output can be estimated at 24 to 28 kg per year with these 4 reactors at Kashu facilities, completed in full operational, producing 6 to 12 kg by each reactor, which is a lump sum amount. And it is estimated that apart from the first reactor, the rest 3 are capable of producing double the amount of the weapons-grade plutonium per year. So all this apart, Pakistan has also repeatedly refused to sign the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which obviously India refused to sign it. And it has also asserted that even if India signs, Pakistan will definitely not necessarily sign the same. Now, recently, the recent activities, this is one of the recent activities of, the presence or the, starting to build the tactical nuclear weapons to, meet the immediate targets. I mean, there are, analysts, there are scientists who call tactical nuclear weapons are not exactly nuclear weapons, but they are battlefield weapons. But it must be, kept in mind that any kind of nuclear-related weapon is obviously, detrimental and is dangerous. So a nuclear weapon is a nuclear weapon and not a conventional weapon as such. So in October 2015, Pakistan announced its engagement in acquiring tactical nuclear weapons, which created serious concerns in global community. Now, after it created serious concern in the global community, obviously there were there were kind of sanctions which were likely to be made, but because of all the multilateralism, all the agreements, the international the corporations, the organizations that came into being, and to keep in pace with everything, things were not taken into much. Things were taken on a much lighter note as such, which was not liked by India. Speaking of now, nuclear deterrence in the region, despite all this proliferation activity, yes, one can say that yes, there's an effective deterrence because the countries have definitely not scourged to any kind of nuclear war, and because of the 2 countries being nuclear armed, and obviously before engaging to any kind of large-scale war, there will be definitely diplomatic thinking, talks, and other gatherings that will actually occur, like a kind of thinking that will be taken. But again, at the same time, we actually cannot trust a country which is actually military coopted. I mean, where everything gets worked on, or probably the most trust is made with the military apart from the government, where the government is just a puppet in the country. So, with both India and Pakistan becoming nuclear armed states, deterrence has created, as has been told. However, despite this, the region has witnessed small-scale wars or warlike conflicts. There have been surgical strikes, during the recent days. I mean, despite being nuclear armed, we cannot stop all these things. We cannot even stop the terrorist activities or the terrorist attacks that are being, taken in the entire subcontinent or in India, I'd say as such. So this has somehow actually, led to instability in the nuclear deterrence in the region. Now, as coined by Sir Francois Heisberg, who is a senior advisor of Europe at the International Institute of Strategic Studies, he actually coined something very important. He said that an unstable nuclear relationship could lead to a catastrophic nuclear conflict. Such an apocalyptic development would have consequences that, although largely unpredictable in their specifics, would be grave for the region and for the international system as a whole. And this is actually something which is, to be kept in mind by the nations as such, and by the governments even. Now, coming to the conclusion, yes, that India, they were scholars, they were scientists, they were diplomats who actually, when India exploded its, first nuclear test, it was in 1974, and it's said that though it was a peaceful nuclear test, but obviously any kind of nuclear test again cannot be said as a peaceful one, because after all, it's a nuclear thing. So there were people who said, like, India made a mistake by doing, this nuclear test. But according to me and my research, and there were several of the scholars who agree on this point, it can be definitely said that it was not a mistake, definitely. And had we not been, nuclear during that time, probably it would have been very late for us to go nuclear. And we don't even know that whether we would have actually been able to succeed the 1998 things as well, like, the second series of nuclear tests that we actually did during that time. So Pakistan's engagement in building nuclear weapons after 1971 war was evident, and their bomb had been underground for a score. Yes, this was also, another reason, obviously, which we came to know after, India exploded its nuclear test. So India's nuclear explosion basically prompted Pakistan's nuclear test in response, and both the countries put forth their nuclear test as an act of deterrence. Now, it is nuclear deterrence that is responsible for nuclear proliferation in South Asia again. Because of nuclear deterrence, the nuclear arsenal is being expanded to maintain the deterrence. And, in the expansion of nuclear arsenal, the proliferation is happening, leading to a nuclear arms race as a whole in South Asia. And this has destabilized the entire region to a great extent. Now, disarmament stands obviously as an unachievable thing, and nuclear proliferation has engaged the world into an armaments race. However, possessing nuclear weapons to deter a country is no longer a high-intensity check on the aggressor, as this in turn has largely given rise to conventional and small-scale wars, as I've already spoken, and it has disturbed the regions. So these combined with domestic conflicts are increasing challenges and tension in the region. Now, to wind up my paper, I would like to be concluding with multilateralism over the years. Now, to my mind, basically, multilateralism is something over the years which have been found focusing on the issues, focusing on the main goals because of which it was formed. It has been always found to work with the nations. I mean, all along with the country, just as its formation, even since its formation, because the countries want to make them work. But as years passed by, it has been found that the concept of multilateralism or the concept of common goals, working towards for the common goal, has withered away, and with time it has been found such. And yes, this withering away also came are the reasons. I mean, these are the reasons of unusual developments, be that economic, political, social, or military relationship between the nations that get through. Now, speaking of COVID-19 pandemic, yes, COVID-19 pandemic has certainly called upon multilateralism again. And there are nations working on the crisis together and several related issues as such. But how long and how well will this continue? Will this multilateralism work in the long run is a question that actually thrives our mind today. Warlike institutions have often been prevented through multilateralism, but again, there has been engagement in warlike situations as well. And we have instances of both the things.
Dear Chair, I think
dear Chair. Hence,
yes, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sahar, for your very informative and very comprehensive analysis on the nuclear deterrence and nuclear proliferation in South Asia.
Yes.
So right now, okay, we are going to have two more panelists giving their papers in this section. Okay, first, may I invite Colonel Sayajit Gosho, a research scholar also coming from the MIT International Studies Institute. He is going to give his paper presentation on the topic, okay, jostling for strategic gains in Indian Ocean region, IOR, India and China, and analytical perspective. Yeah, Colonel Gosha, please. The floor is yours. Hello.
Colonel Satyajit, are you there?
He's already on.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes, you are on.
Just one sec, sir. I'm uploading my presentation.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, take your time.
Good afternoon, everyone, to the chair, Naga ma'am, Shirish sir, everybody present, and to Dr. Lau also. In next 10 minutes, the time allocated to me, I'll be talking about importance of Indian Ocean region, the jostling for strategic gains between China and India. And I'll just try to analyze, because 10 minutes is too short to give insight into this entire aspect with regards to covering this comprehensive topic, because there's a hell lot of data structures to be given to support this. However, I'll try to run through this and try to give you the importance of this region for both the nations and what lies ahead. So that's the broad construct that I'm going to speak in next 10 minutes. At any given point in time, because of being in a low region where this internet connectivity is a bit low, I'll request, if ever I am not audible, to just let me know the same, please. Okay. Now with that as a backdrop, the scope of the paper which I'm going to present is China and India's interest, the objectives and strategy in Indian Ocean region, their respective objectives and strategies. The politics of geography. This region has got a unique geographical construct which needs to be understood as to why China is trying to vie for whatever it's trying to vie in the Indian Ocean region. And finally, the way ahead as to what lies ahead in the Indian Ocean region for all the principal players, not only for India and China. Okay. Now, with that as a backdrop, let's look at it, and just this is briefly to orient people with regards to those who are not acquainted with this region as to what China, the land and the maritime boundaries are. I'm just representative here, if my cursor can be seen, that while China is the world's third largest country in terms of area, it has also got the largest number of neighbors, 14 of them sharing 22,000 kilometers of land border. And they are listed out towards the right of it. And just as represented, some of you, if you have not been to, this is the way the Chinese border markers pillars are presented wherever on their land borders. This is just to give you an overview of how the land borders are being there. And it has got an outstanding border issue with India. The issue was that when the geopolitical and the geostrategic jostling for space takes place, most often than not, the conflicts do have a habit of flowing outside the border regions, that is the land border region. And that is the reason why we need to understand China's maritime borders. You look at this map, you see that China is not very gifted with the natural harbors. And because of the reason that it has got an extended coastline, it has got East China Sea and South China Sea named after it. But the fact of life is, if you see the lay of other countries, which are the littoral states in this very region, East China Sea and South China Sea, you will find that the Chinese Navy doesn't have much of maneuvering space when it comes to the Lebensraum, or that when we're talking about the space. And that is the reason why, despite East China Sea and the South China Sea, because of positive time, I'm not going to bring out the importance. I have listed it out on the slide here for everybody to read. What you need to understand is that China has always been, that is the reason why, trying to claim regions and making it exclusively its own, so that it gets that place, that space to play around as part of a emerging world power. And that is the reason why the seed of the conflict lies here. When you look at the coastline from east to west, and when you look, or rather from north to south, and you look that despite having harbors, the playing around space is not there. and bulk of your energy needs as a rising superpower is going to come from this region. So somewhere down the line, you need to look for regions beyond through which your areas come. And when I'll be speaking about the percentages of the trade that takes place of China with regards to the oceanic regions from which it comes, the importance of Indian Ocean automatically emerges. Now we look at, that's the reason I just brought it out to you. The top map here is the East China Sea, and the bottom map here is the South China Sea. And if you see these dashes line, this is that famous 9-dash line by which China has been trying to proclaim whole of South China Sea. Principal areas, despite the UN SLOC, that is laws of the sea, despite that, these unilateral interpretation of the aspect of littoral states and their regions going beyond is the issue of contention. And what China wants is, as the Romans used to call, if you see on the slide here, as they try to claim the Mediterranean Sea, they want to call it the Lebanon or their own sea. And that is the reason why once they have stitched this up, because last 30 years, despite occasional moments of murmur, there's not been much of contest with regards to China with regards to its claim in South or East China Sea. Now coming on, when we come on to the aspect to Indian Ocean region as to why it is, and this is understood by this metric which I am giving you here. When the engine of your economic growth demands ever increasing and ever increasing amounts of resources and raw material, which bulk are petroleum based, and these resources are being drawn from distant and faraway lands because you don't have them naturally occurring in your own mainland, then the sea routes become the most important aspect. And that is the reason why they become the most cost-effective movement in terms of volume, time, and space. With that as a backdrop, if you look at it, now you look at this map, and this brings out the percentages points here. When we look at the percentage points, through the various areas, if you look at the red arrows here, the crude oil imports by sea and the natural gas imports by sea in black arrows, with regards to the percentages that it is coming from is evident for the entire audience here. Look at it from the Arctic Sea, it is just getting 3%, from the Pacific coast 2%, from the oceanic regions it is getting 3%, 82% of its energy requirements in terms of crude oil and natural gas is coming through the Indian Ocean region. And balance of it is coming again from the Africa Atlantic coast, but it is also flowing through the Indian Ocean region. And that is the reason that that's 26%. So when we look at these percentages, the China's interest is but natural, and to sustain its ambitions as a superpower in making, or rather a superpower waiting to arrive on the world scene, that is the reason why this metric becomes so very important. Now, if having studied that, just as a representative viewpoint, to just put this entire thing into perspective, we have to look at it from this angle, that China's 12.237 trillion economy, that is 2017, the total merchandise trade was 4.105 trillion. And apart of this, 90% of this was worth $3.69 trillion was seaborne. And at an average, if we give it, at any given month in 2017, approximately $307 billion worth of Chinese trade was moving through the sea. And I have given you already which are the principal routes through which it was moving. So then, hence the importance of Indian Ocean is so very evident here. Now, the interest I have highlighted here, what you need to understand is that apart from the resources issues which I have already killed here, the free access to Indian Ocean region is what it contests, because China feels that despite Indian Ocean being the only region in the world which is named after a country, it still feels that it should have free access to it. Indians never claim that it has a unilateral access over it the way China does for South and East China Sea. Howsoever, they also want to contest the perception of American maritime hegemony here. And that is important, because to arrive as a new superpower on the scene, you have to displace someone. And in the long run, as we look at it, that India and China, India's principal issues in the foreseeable future in the geographic, the strategic, economic, any field will remain with regards to China. Similarly, for China, it remains with regards to the United States. And that is the reason why it just brings this aspect out. Now, it also wants to contain in its perception India's ambition to control the Indian Ocean. It's debatable whether Indians have that ambition or not to control, whether they have the wherewithal or not. subsequently, as we cover a few more slides, it will become apparent. But what I wanted to bring out to you here is that it also is because naval data is so very essential and so very dependent upon a lot of geographic features and parameters, including weather, tide, and everything. This dual use data collection is a mainstay of the Chinese. And apart from that, it wants a stake in the regional security architecture. Having seen that, what's the strategy that China is going to have? China's strategy out here for the IOR is build up strategic posture, which it is doing, choose appropriate places, which it has done, which I'll be flagging eventually, build linkages, which it has done, and it's proceeding gradually. Over the years, this proceeding gradually has gained momentum and speed, by which now the countries in the region have taken a deep look at it. Somewhere they have sat up and taken notice, and this gradually is no more gradual. Now, how's the modus operandi? Though modus operandi is very simple. They have inculcated at target countries, and it's very simple that these countries are at the lower end of the development curve. They are nascent democracies, and they have got pliable governments. And how have they lured them? Large attractive projects, use of military sales, provision of soft loans, and debt to equity model. This is most important for us to understand. And this is the kind of new colonialism which China is spreading, which the world is becoming wiser, but probably the countries which have already been into these agreements probably are realizing it a bit too late. However, if I just bring it out and to sum this up, how does the PLAN stands for People's Liberation Army, that is Navy here, that is PLA, that is China has this habit of PLA and PLAF. So that is how the naval aspect here, that it has since 2008 gone into huge amount of anti-piracy missions to show its presence in this region. It has done combat deployments, which is there, these logistics bases, which you can see here. Apart from that, exercises and visits, submarine deployments, this humanitarian and disaster relief, and thereafter non-combatant extraction operations, which it did. And apart from that, constructively engage the regions, the nations in this region, which you can see right from Djibouti to, for example, Seychelles here. At the bottom end of the slide, you can see that how it has gone proactively in engaging it through the means that I covered in the last slide. Having seen this, now coming on to it, you have to understand that China's center of gravity with regards to its economic interest and the strategic interest flowing out of it lies squarely in the Indian Ocean region. And that is the reason why China has chosen its ports very, very carefully. And if you notice, they are situated along critical international sea lanes, and the terms and fundings is very, very clear cut, and it's for everybody else to see. It's not a secret, it's open and Googleable, you can see. And debt for equity mode, I have brought it out that how considerable portion of the sovereignty and the authority over your own areas you end up losing by investing in this Chinese debt for equity model. And the economic vulnerability of states is being absolutely exploited, and that's the neo-colonialism I brought it out to you. We have understood that. Where does India come? And India, I'm just showing it to you quickly on this. India's land and maritime boundaries are shown here. With Afghanistan, if you notice, it's technically there because the disputed area which Pakistan has ceded to China, that portion does touch with Afghanistan. So technically, India has got 6 countries with which it has got borders compared to China's 14. And if you understand that, you also look at it that India is a principal, I would say, a maritime power. Not only now, right from past, if you see, Shivaji had his admiral called Kanoji Angre. And before that, if you look at it, that Southeast Asia, down till Angkor Wat, Cambodia, and every place else, the influence of Indian scriptures and the way the temple and the architecture has gone, I'm not going to go into the details there. It very clearly brings out the reach of the Indian maritime might right from times immemorial. And look at the way India is oriented here. If you look at the map, unlike China, which I brought out to you earlier, look how India is amongst the world's 6 nations, which is abundantly gifted and wonderfully gifted with natural harbors, is absolutely tailor-made for naval presence. And with regards to it, that's the reason why right since the Britishers set up till they left, India was such a huge naval presence for the British, because the British became the power that the sun never sat on the English Empire was courtesy the Royal Navy and its reach. And if you look at it, the maritime borders of India have got its connect with 7 nations. And if you look at it, that compared to India's land borders, 4,000 odd kilometers, India's sea borders are 7,000 kilometers, which is almost 50% more. So somewhere down the line, the Indians post-independence had not given the due emphasis to the naval expansion and the naval power the way it has given to its land power vis-a-vis the other countries of the world. It's woken up. It's not woken up too late, but it has woken up. And somewhere down the line, having the 4th largest navy in the world, which is NATO standards, cutting edge, somewhere down the line, the Indians are arriving. And that is the reason why, if you look at this map towards the right, India's international borders and coast, with regards to the borders, the contrast of its land borders with regards to its sea borders, with the number of states that it touches in both these parameters is very important for us to understand the significance of Indian Ocean. Now, why does it matter to India? Here I have brought it out in clear as to 70% of our oil comes to this, because we are not very, very self-contained in regards to the need of fulfilling our oil and energy requirements. Even if we are not yet a superpower or not yet deemed emerging superpower, as an emerging power and a regional power, we have our energy needs, and like China, our energy needs come out of this region. And that's why it's so very essential that we focus on this, and the Indians are focusing on it. And that is the reason why India has now aggressively expanded its naval presence to include establishment of listening posts in Seychelles, Madagascar, and Mauritius. And in late 2000, what it has done is that it successfully co-opted the Maldives as part of its Southern Naval Command. China is often accused of engaging a string of pearls strategy, which the Americans ended up giving this term, which Indians also use. However, judging by the Indian naval buildup, the truth could be actually quite the opposite. And then let's look at it. Look at these 2 maps, the contrast, and why I have inverted this map here. You need to understand, Indians need to look at its seas, the oceans, from a renewed focus and stop getting oriented toward its land borders. That is the reason why this map I have put deliberately upside down. When we talk to naval officers, they end up talking that India is too land centric, and far too many times Indians need to look at the strategic reach of Andaman Nicobar Islands, almost touching Indonesia, and absolutely sitting astride the Straits of Malacca. And if a naval presence is there, which is there, it can absolutely choke the Chinese SLOC with regards to its oil and gas requirements. Indians need to think strategic. And look at China. If you can see the cursor on my screen, you can just look how its coast is hemmed in by the various land masses of other countries. And that is why, despite wanting to be a natural sea power, unlike US, 2 clear coasts, look at Russia, look at any other developing or deemed naval power, compared to Indians, the Chinese do not have or not been gifted with the power of the landscape and the geography. That is the reason why I call this the politics of geography here. Having said that, now coming on to this gives the presence, while the first map here gives out the Chinese string of pearls, look at India's presence in the Indian Ocean. Consequently, India also has woken up and has gone about it in a very steadied and a measured fashion in giving out its presence in the Indian Ocean region. And if you look at it, while China is not an Indian Ocean power, and yet it is investing a lot of diplomatic and military capital in becoming one, I showed you the metrics already. In retaliation, India is also not a sea power in South China and East China Sea, but look at it, how it's been constructively engaging the Philippines, the Vietnamese, and everybody else in the region, and the Quad with regards to Japan and Australia coming in. This is the crux of the Sino-Indian strategic rivalries, and it is going to stay here for the foreseeable future. And what one needs to understand is that the rivalries in Indian Ocean and the Asia Pacific region are not limited to China and India. It is also related to so many other countries which are listed out on the slide. I'm not going to waste time reading it. However, what I want to bring out to you is that is the reason why this coinage of the strategic word Indo-Pacific and linking the 2 regions, once which were as different than chalk and cheese, now assumes strategic importance. So why the Indian Ocean matters? Just to sum it up, 3rd largest water body in the world, containing vital sea lanes that help feed some of Asia's largest economies. And these sea lanes in Indian Ocean are most strategically important in the world, because according to the Journal of Indian Ocean Region, more than 80% of the world's seaborne trade in oil transits to IOR choke points, 40% through Straits of Hormuz, 35% through Straits of Malacca, and 8% through Bab al-Mandab Strait. And that is the reason why China is so very sensitive to Indian and American presence. Having said that, now coming on to the aspect of it, let's look at it. We need to understand that, can we be accommodative? Can the Indians or the Americans be accommodative to China's aggressive behavior? And I can only say it with one slide, that the Chinese understand only the position of strength. The apparent lack of any pushback against China's incrementally expanding claims over geographical areas, East and South China Sea, non-claiming has shown that generates only disdain in the Chinese mind, because for 5,000 years, the Middle Kingdom has always thought that it has been the center of the world's civilization. And that is the reason why it has disdain towards people ceding space. And that is the reason why we need to be proactive in our approach with regards to the Chinese apparent hegemony in East, that is Indian Ocean region. Now, understand it from this angle, that while the Americans have almost ceded space to the Chinese in the South China Sea, which we need to understand is that the same shouldn't happen in Indian Ocean region, and the geographic competition, the space between India and China, it coincides in the Indian Ocean and is the probable theater of confrontation, because America's command structure is seen, as I can show you on the slide, and bulk of it you see here. US naval presence.
Satyajit, your voice is not coming up.
Ma'am, hello.
Yeah, being heard.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes. Can you just wrap it up in 1 minute?
Okay, I'm wrapping up in 1 minute.
Yeah,
so
thank
this
you.
is what I just wanted to bring out, that somewhere down the line, the American interest in this region with regards to its regional this thing is given here. And just as a this thing, that's the reason why we need to understand it from this angle.
Satyajit, I think you're not being heard.
Okay, ma'am, my poor network is the reason, unfortunately. So, ma'am, just wanted to, am I audible now?
Yes, yes, you are.
Yes, please.
So what I wanted to bring out to you, that if you look at it, if you look at the construct here, when we are talking about it, that the prefix geo in the geopolitics refers to a country's strategic geography, the core spatial assumptions. And that's the reason why the strategic geography is defined by where its positions and the spatial boundaries of its interests on the real geography. Look at the Chinese model. Their strategy is extractive model of connectivity to attain geo-economic objectives, and where in India, it's inclusive model of cooperation. And just the last slide, though I had many slides, just wanted to bring out to you that what measures have we taken in the Indians and the Chinese. What we understand is that this constructive engagement is something called as NAMO strategy, and which the Prime Minister of India gave. And in a sublime, in one sentence, the maritime connectivity which it brings out with regards to China has got its own, the Belt and Road Initiative, the ASEAN has got one own, and India has given out NAMO's bouquet. And this bouquet is in terms of, N stands for International North-South Transport Corridor, A stands for Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, M stands for Project MOSSAM, O stands for Open Seas, and S stands for Sagar, that is growth for all in the region, security and growth for all in the region. So this is how it is. Just quickly flip through the same. And what I'm trying to bring out to you is that there is, in the Shanghai Shangri-La dialogue in 2018, the Prime Minister gave this aspect out. And while we are there, the aspect which needs to understand is that compared to China, India has got no options with regards to the economic might that China has got, but by inclusivity and getting on board people or the nations which are not feeling very much comfortable with China's hegemony in this region, we can have a win-win situation. So Sagar is that concept. And with that as a backdrop, I have just culminated and I finished my presentation here. Thank you everyone for patiently listening to me.
Okay, thank you, Sayajin, for giving us such a timely and important analysis.
I'm giving a call, 5 minutes.
Yeah, and also especially given the fact that the Indo-Pacific is increasingly become a geostrategic focal point for India and China. So thank you very much for giving us such a comprehensive analysis. Last but not least, okay, we are going to have Mr. Hari Das, and he is going to give a paper presentation on the topic, okay, new bipolarity, a bless or a curse for the future of India. Mr. Hari Das, please. Okay, so the floor is all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Love for chairing this session, and I want to thank MT, my faculties and AIS for giving me this opportunity. Am I audible and my slides are visible?
Yes, all good.
Thank you. Well, my paper today, the paper which I'm going to present today is my analysis of how this new bipolarity is going to be a bliss or a curse for the India's future. First, I will start by giving a brief detailed background on how this world changed from unipolarity to bipolarity. If you see, since the beginning of the 21st century, the Chinese economy was booming at a rapid pace. Its GDP was growing at an average rate of 12.7% for an consecutive years, thanks to its export-driven economy. This exponential growth generated surplus revenue, which helped the Chinese to face the 2008 economic crisis with budget surplus at the time when all the economies of the world, especially the West, was facing the crisis with budget deficit. This surplus revenue at the hand of the socialist Chinese government helped the country to come out of the crisis aggressively with a stimulus package of 586 billion USD. This quick reprisal of Chinese economy out of the crisis questioned the ability of the Washington Consensus, which was based on market leadership, which failed to give the solution to 1997 Asian financial crisis and caused the subprime crisis. Whereas the Beijing Consensus, which was based on authoritarian ruling and the state intervention, helped it. This rise of new consensus led the foundation for the new bipolarity. As the Chinese, with the surplus economy, not only revived the domestic environment, they pumped the Chinese money into different countries around the world. In 2008, China became the single largest foreign creditor to United States. China gave this current credit in return for market access. This system was unofficially called by many scholars as Chimerica, which helped the China to become the second largest economy of the world in 2020. But this system became a curse for the United States. The trade deficit between US and China rose to 375.6 billion in 2016 from 103.6 billion in 2002. This led to the trade war that we all know and the future attractions between them, which is happening and altering the world right now. Now, the question that arises to me when I was going through this is whether this new bipolarity will turn into a Cold War. Well, it can turn into a Cold War, but the thing is, the nature of the Cold War that we witnessed during the after the World Wars, that will not be the case now, because the world that we witnessed in 20th century is not the same today. The European countries are no longer handicapped. Many new nations that were born at that time were no longer infant. They are strong emerging nations right now. This bipolarity, I believe, set the pitch for the new great game. The moment China became the second largest economy of the world, it gave the Chinese a new confidence, which helped them to revive their expansionist policy. Along with this, if they want to expand their country's expansionist policy now they have to do it along the United States, which set the competitions between the two. Both were now trying to enlarge their footprints across the world. In this great game, if we see the major geostrategy of these poles is directed towards South Asia and most importantly India. The reason for India taking the center point is just because of its geographical position at the heart of the Indian Ocean, where majority of the world trade is taking place right now. Plus its close proximity with the new superpower China. Second, its innate economic potential as well. I believe that India is the only country in the world right now has the potential to replace China in the future. World Bank estimated that by 2030, India will be the third largest economy, mostly because of our rich human capital. Majority of Indian population are Middle East, which is a rich resource right now. With such potential, India has become the pivot of South Asia. But unfortunately, India never had coordinated relationship with both present poles right now, both US and China. The important elements, mutual trust, mutual interest, and trust was always missing. First, if we take China, with China, both the countries were born at the same time, fighting over the border since their independence. From the 1962 Indo-China war till the present Ladakh region. Being nuclear powers with larger economies, both are vying to be the Asia's undisputed superpower. Hence are suspicious about each other's actions. US, when you come to US, since the beginning of our independence, US has been a strong ally of Pakistan, which we have seen in multiple arenas starting from the different wars. It might be a war between India, Pakistan, 1965 or 1971. Then it got deep in the 1979 Soviet invasion when both were India, US and Pakistan were working towards removing Soviet Union from the Afghanistan region, which had overspills in Indian region as well with the inception of Mujahideen. Considering these actions of US in the past, it is instilled in the minds of the Indian representative that United Nations can never be trusted. But this situation started to change. Some changes that happened from the year 2010 to 2015. The dynamic changes that happened are the reasons for laid the foundation for the new changes that we are witnessing today. The first major change is the rising tensions between the two poles. Then the moment China became the second largest economy of the world, US became alerted. US thought that if China grows at this level, it will be the biggest threat for the US in the future. So the first measure taken by US is it came up with the pivot to Asia policy, which to counter China and to rebalance the Asian regions. But to US dismay, China was unstoppable. China in 2013 came up with its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, which was interpreted by the United States as the new age expansionist policy of China. After this, in 2014, US decided to withdraw its troops from the Afghanistan region as it felt that the need for the United Nations presence in the Afghanistan is no longer needed. The moment that their interest in Afghanistan faded, their need for Pakistan also faded away. As their new objective to counter China, for that they need India more than Pakistan. So at the same time period, India also underwent some fundamental changes. New set of representatives took charge with new ideologies. When the new representatives came to power, they came up with some objectives. First, to bring India out of the slowdown that it was witnessing around 2014, then adapt development policies, and finally to become the Asian superpower. For these objectives, first to bring India out of the slowdown, India was very much sure that to make these objectives to reality, it needs the cooperation of both the superpowers. It may be US and China. So it first bolstered its economic relationship with China. China pledged to invest around $20 billion in the Indian economy in the future. Similarly, it strengthened its defense relationship with US. India was very successful in undertaking this middle path diplomacy, but unfortunately, and it actually paid off. India's economy came out of the slowdown and was growing at a well pace. But unfortunately, India could not continue this middle path diplomacy because of the changes. Because of some of the changes that happened after 2015, especially in 2015. The first major change is the intensified relationship between US. The trade war began between the China and the US. Then another important reason is the Chinese expansionist policy, which India was always conscious about, reached the Indian borders sooner than expected in the form of BRI and string of pearls, which encircled India from all sides and increased the strategic presence of China in the Indian Oceans. These actions and the later Chinese aggression across the Indian border established a ground for mutual cooperation between US and India. Now, with this background, I guess we can see how this new bipolar world will help India. To see how it is going to help India. First, let me tell the change what India since 2014, India has actually undertaken various measures like Make in India, Made in India, strengthening itself, relaxing the foreign investments rules and regulations, and to make sure that all the necessary infrastructure needed for the future development of India is in place, which will attract the foreign investors, and was waiting for the right moment and the right moment they got with the help of trade war and the next upcoming decoupling between the US and China. The great decoupling between US and China necessitated the need for US to find the alternative to replace its biggest trading partner. And similarly, the big technological companies of the West also need an alternative destination to replace China. As this search was going on, it coincided in around 2020, because the great decoupling started in 2019 and it came into 2020. The same time, the COVID-19 happened and the new trade war got into the new technological war with 5G as a central point. When US was very much aware about the potential of 5G it will bring along with, and at the same time it was realized that China is taking the leadership in the 5G technology, replacing US. This was considered this became a biggest threat to the United States. So to destroy the Chinese rise, US is undertook various means to impede the growth, starting from naming it as a national threat to banning special microprocessor chips. But these measures of US in long run will hurt itself if not found an alternative. Thankfully, the launch of Geo from the Indian side with the indigenous end-to-end 5G technology helped India to gain the confidence of the West and US. Many American companies are supporting India. Qualcomm alone is pledged to invest $97 billion in Geo with considerable equity to boost the 5G infrastructure. Similarly, Apple has started manufacturing in Indian plants. If you see the FDI inflow in the present year so far from US has reached 40 billion. Together, it has helped the Indian forest reserve to reach an all-time high of 523 million. The high forex reserve will strengthen the Indian currency and will increase the foreign investors' confidence and will encourage future investment. Apart from this, India will not only become an alternative investment hub of the world, it also has an opportunity to increase its market share. When the tariff war between the US and China began, the cost of Chinese products in the US market began to increase, opening the way, making the US market more competitive and paving the way for new competitors like India. According to the Ministry of Commerce report, it is said that India gained that 755 million in market share and in additional exports to US, which will help India to increase its market share from 2% to 5% in the next 5 years. The economic benefits that I have mentioned so far that India will be getting from US, for sure it will increase help India to grow its potential. But at the same time, if we see these economic benefits to an extent, India can also get from China, allying with China. But India did not ally with China. India was more allying with US than China. And why is that? Because of the political benefit that India is going to get. As mentioned, India as an object, both China and India are vying to be the undisputed Asian powers. And this is something China can never give India, but allying with the United States, India can get this. If you see, since 2014, US is trying to make India as a net security provider along the Indian region. In 2015, the renewal and upgradation of the Defense Technology and Cooperative Initiative Agreement took the Indian US defense cooperation to the next level. According to CIPRI, it is mentioned that the present day's weapon exports from India stands at around $18 billion. Along with this, the intensified defense exercises across the India-Pacific region. In fact, in 2019, US and India has decided to conduct a tri-service exercise, which so far India has conducted only with Soviet Union. The exercise name is called Tiger Triumph. This, along with this development, slow developments, the year 2020, which I believe took the US-India defense or political relations to the next level. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement that the largest and the oldest democracy of the world should work together to face the authoritarian challenge. This statement actually came at the time when the 20 Indian soldiers were dead at the borders. Together, this aggression and the statement, along with this previous Chinese aggressions I meant not only in this, there are other forms of aggression. China is blocking India's membership in many international organizations like NSG, UNSC, etc. Together, they bolstered the US-India relations. After the both US and India relations went to the next level, we can see the many stronger actions taken by India. India, the major being the enthusiastic participation of India in war, which India was not accepting previously. Second is India is planning to accept Australia to be a part of Malabar Express. Both were actually in the past rejected by the India because of Beijing. These strong actions taken by India will help not only help India to grow, but also it will help in attracting our neighbors who are also under the wrath of Chinese aggression. Now the curse path. As I mentioned, the Chinese bipolarity, is how the US how India's alignment with the US is helping the Indian economy to grow. This is actually a good, this bipolarity is acting as a bliss for India so far, can also become a curse in the future of India. It is because of India.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Hari, but I think we need to just confine because we are having some.
Yes, sir. I'm going to finish it off.
Please be precise.
So far, become a curse for the future of India can become a curse if India is not realizing that it's too much inclination to US, undermining China, which in a long run can become a pawn in the great game. The benefits that India is getting from US happening in parallel to the decoupling between India and China as well. Washington is trying to capitalize India to follow its decoupling plan by utilizing the border tensions. See the India's recent actions like India is clamping down the investments from China and its bordering neighbors, make prior government approvals for all the direct investments. These multilateral scrutiny or restrictions is done by India to protect country's national interests, increase its footprint of Chinese investment, and also follow the US. These restrictions are not cheap. For India, China's tech investors has put investment as 4 billion, has invested in 4 billion. And India imports majority of capital goods from China, which is needed for India's export. If China tomorrow decides to retaliate and put restrictions on this, it must be a big threat for the Indian economy. Of course, I accept we know the fact that US is there for India, but that itself is the curse which I was meaning. A unilateral dependency on one country, that too with the United States, will be the worst nightmare India has ever dreamt of. Unilateral dependency on one country will in future make the country more vulnerable. Now to conclude, I want to say the current actions and the current nature of Indian government, how the way of they are acting. Thankfully, I believe that India is well aware of the pitfalls of relying too much on US. It is well aware of the history of the US foreign policy orientation, how it shifts from time to time based on the country's national interest. That is why even though India was closely allied with US, it is very much cautious on where to allow US and where not to. US is very much enthusiastic and waiting for asking for permission to India to interfere in the Indo-China border issues, but India has rejected it outrightly multiple times. At the same time, India took the same issue to the South Shanghai Cooperation Organization for mediation under Russia. I believe that if India is taking such smart actions, it is sure that India is aware of the fact that the United States need India more than India needs United States. This smart action will also prove to the world that India is a sovereign, strong, independent nation rather than a pawn in the great game. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haridas, okay, for your wonderful, for your very informative, comprehensive presentation on this triangular dynamics of India, China, and the US. I've got, I think, roughly two questions being asked by the audience. So if I just very briefly, can I just first of all invite Mr. Haridas?
Yes.
A question is being asked by an audience. This is what is said in the quote. How do India's neighbors view China's growing intervention in South Asia? Okay, this is the question for you.
Yeah, the answer from the what I see how the Indian neighbors is, even the South Asian region, that is our neighbors, it is also a divided thing. Say if you take Pakistan and Nepal are having very good relationship. They are fine with Chinese intervention in South Asian region. At the same time, if you see Sri Lanka, which is already a Sri Lanka, which is already a part of the debt trap, is not actually accepting the Chinese interventions. So it is actually divided. If you see the world new power block happens, even the South Asian region also has the possibility of dividing into two blocks, one under India and the another under China.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for your response. Okay, got and questions for Colonel Sayajin.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the question being asked by an audience is what kind of impact will India make on the world's political order if it comes out of multilateralism and follow unilateralism dominating the whole region, okay, to fulfill its capability of becoming equal to US and China, specifically in IOR, the Indian Ocean region? Can it emerge as said in the future?
Okay.
End of the question, yes.
Am I audible, please?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Very
good.
categorically, if I take the first part of the question, that what kind of impact will India make on the world's political order if it comes out of multilateralism, it will be a huge impact. It will be like tectonic plate rubbing against each other and creating another Himalayas in the process, because this is absolute departure from India's stated policy. For two reasons: it will shock the world, and everything people come to once something like that happens. In IR and in geopolitics, there are very, very less instances of a nation absolutely doing a 180 degrees change of course on its stated intent. So from that yardstick, I don't see it coming out with this. So if it ever does so, it will be a huge upheaval, a shocker for everyone. Howsoever, I don't foresee that happening for 2-3 reasons. And everything is, in today's world, everything. See, China could become a superpower. America could become, and any other power. We see rise and fall of nations, Paul Kennedy, everywhere we look at it, it all boils down to economics. Today, the way that the Indian economy is being driven with regards to those growth rates, which were at one time such a poster boy kind of a growth rate for the world, and presently not so, I would say, illustrious. Somewhere down the line, to become a great military power, you require huge amount of economic clout. Presently, India doesn't have that. So that is the reason why, apart from this, apart from our stated notions of always going in for multilateralism, right from getting independent, not going into any of the power blocks of the Soviets or the Americans, and then becoming a founder member of NAM, that is non-aligned movement, then SARC, everywhere India's stated foreign policy has always been looking forward to having a multilateral approach. I don't find India ever going to get out of the mode and departure from it. Reason, it alienates everybody in SAARC, despite not being, and I've heard principal amount of speakers for the whole day here. A lot of people feel that India is hegemon. If you ask the Indian foreign policy makers, the kind of aid and everything else, limited aid, howsoever, with regards to ourselves being a developing nation, that the way India doles out aid to its neighbors and tries to help them out, it is anything but a hegemon. So from that angle, we look at it, India it doesn't want to come out of multilateralism. It will not be in its interest. It will drive away all the people who are still on board with it on many of the issues, because we require consensus to get about what we want in our world politics with regards to our permanent interests. Howsoever, if ever it has to tread that path, it will require huge amount of economic effort and capability, which it doesn't have. And in the foreseeable future, not in, if I hazard a guess, lastly, not in the next 40-50 years that we are going to emerge from this shadow. Neither is US going to wane, nor is China going to wane, in the sense that they will be ascending, we will be ascending, but somewhere down the line, I don't think so in this region there will be a space for a third power center. Howsoever, to do so, India will have to look at its own polity and the fractured mandate and the consensus building as part of our national governance to any issue which is even strategic in nature. If India can do away with that culture, probably yes, not before that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just got a final question for Dr. Swasti Rao. The question being asked by an audience is, he would like to know your views on the South Asian countries' borders post-colonial period. And also, how can we define them, as well as we all know that the border dispute is still going on between them. Yeah, this is his or her question for you, Dr. Rao.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. See, first of all, I would just like to clarify the one thing, that the borders are not going away anywhere in near future, okay? And the purpose of the presentation was not to say that the borders are irrelevant, but the purpose of my paper was to actually build a parallel narrative where we all, you know, understand the limitation of the cartographic victimization of South Asia. Right. So that was the presentation. That was the presentation all about. That was the main point of the presentation. Likewise, the other thing, what you're saying as to how can the conflicts be resolved? Okay. So obviously, if you are because, you know, if you are aware of the constructivist international relations theory, ultimately, you know, if you're given a concept, ultimately the meaning of that concept is dependent upon what the majority you know, makes of it. So like anarchy is what states make of it. Similarly, if we are talking about the border disputes, and we have so many in South Asia, I think we have to ultimately somewhere ask the, you know, the intellectual class, the, you know, as to what really are we making of it. So because the point that I want to drive home is that while there are border conflicts in the whole of South Asia, but on the other hand, we also have certain areas like the way, and I've been talking about it, you know, the domains of knowledge construction, which we have not looked at carefully, which we have not really given the kind of attention it deserves. And there is enough scholarship which says that, you know, it is not just the larger South Asian identity that we share, but it is also the shared history of resistance, etc., to colonialism. And therein the post-colonial theory becomes important. So ultimately, I'm saying that it is not a point which can be resolved, you know, like in a 2-minute answer. But as long as we are not, so, you know, like at least sincere about creating and trying to see what that space is going to give us. Just a little example that I would like to give you. Like, look at the COVID situation, right? So like, what is the world reality telling us? The world reality is telling us that the kind of a world we are entering is not a world that can be understood in binaries. Right? That is the reality where we're entering. So look at the COVID situation, the post-pandemic world situation, the world order, what is happening. On the one hand, the COVID tells us that the national borders are not important because, you know, the pandemic doesn't identify borders. It doesn't affect you, you know, based on your borders, right? But on the other hand, we see a kind of a return of the nation state, because it is the nation state, you know, which is giving us the healthcare programs and the bailout packages, etc. So what are we we are coming to a kind of an ambivalence, right? And what we have started to realize is that, yes, there is a multiplexity of factors, and at the same time, there is also a return of the nation state, return of the great power rivalry. So ultimately, what we're trying to understand, or what we're getting to, is that we cannot look at the world in binaries. If we cannot look at the world in binaries, we cannot look at conflicts and disputes in binaries too. So while on the one hand, we definitely need to do everything that we can to guard our borders, etc. But on the other hand, I think personally, we have to, develop these mechanisms, and especially the intellectual and analytical tools to be able to make sense of the reality as we have inherited it, right? So that is my 2 bit on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your response. I believe these are all the questions, okay, that I have received from the floor. So thank you once again. Thank you very much for all the panelists for all your very insightful presentation, observation, and analysis. Yes, I think time is probably running out, but anyway. Also, once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to chair this section. It is really once again my pleasure, my honor and privilege to get involved in this very timely and important webinar for today. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I hope that I'm audible.
Yes, Baki, you're audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have come to the end of the session, and on behalf of the Amity Institute of International Studies, NICE, and the Mulder Foundation, I take this opportunity to thank all those who have graced us with their presence today and contributed their parts to make this session a resounding success. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and sincere thanks to Dr. Raymond for agreeing to chair the session today. A sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of this event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. And finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who participated in this session so enthusiastically, and those who are watching this live on Facebook channel. Thank you for all the valuable time and attention, and for making this session productive with your questions. We're truly honored to have you all with us this afternoon, and we hope to stay connected in future as well. We look forward to host you all once again very soon, very, very soon. And please do join us in the next session. Thank you.